What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmaker's Corner podcast. I'm your host for today, Simon Villanos, aka Coach V. And on this episode, which is recorded, I'm recording this intro at least, at it's 11:25 p.m., May 26th, 2026 here. Whew, it's been a long day, but recording this intro right here, we are going to go ahead and recognize some of the best from the 2026 Women's College Flag Football season. This is your 2026 PMC Award show here. On this episode, we have a whole bunch of players that we're going to recognize, players for best quarterback, running back, receiver, position players, Newcomer of the Year, Offensive Playmaker of the Year, Defensive Playmaker of the Year, MVP, Iron Woman of the Year, which is new here, going to the best two-way player, in our opinions, as well as Coach of the Year, which will be a good one. Newcomer of the Year going to our best freshman. A whole bunch of awards to give out, a whole bunch of finalists to recognize as well. But, we're also going to talk about our all-PMC teams. I know, they have just released all-American teams, at least for the NAI, I want to say. But that is coach voted on these all-PMC teams. These are media awards the all-PMC teams are decided by the members of the Playmaker's Corner, myself, Cody, and Gino. We sat down and argued and yelled and figured out who deserves to make our all PMC teams. And the big difference is that we do have positional limits here, so you can't have like a million quarterbacks and only one rusher, right? Our limits for all our PMC teams go 3 quarterbacks, 4 receivers, 2 utility, 2 rusher, 3 linebacker, and 4 DBs. We have an all PMC team, which basically serves as our all-American team, but we did do all NAI, D1, D2, D3, JUCO, I think we are currently still working on, but we did all of those as well. Make sure you check out us at Playmaker's Corner on social media to find those posts, and then check out our website at playmakerscorner.com. We will make sure to post those as well. But then all of those made our all-PMC team, which is made up of the best flag football players from women's college flag football, regardless of division and level, as long as it was not club. We did not include clubs, and most of these players either are on scholarship or, they're part of a varsity program. And then same thing goes with our all-freshman team here, considered players from all divisions. So we're going to talk about that, and then at the very end, we're going to talk about our final rankings here in the postseason, as voted on by myself, Cody, and women's college flag football here. But let's go ahead and talk about the process with these votes. In case you are a first timer listening to how our PMC award votes, has what we have been doing women's college flag football end of the year awards pretty much since 2022, just focusing on NAI until this last season here where we opened it up to all these teams. And so basically how it works is that you have a number of voters from the media or people who are involved in the flag football world. From the media, you have myself, Cody, and Gino representing PMC. We each get 1 vote. We have our guy Corey at NAI F-Ball. Make sure you check them out, but they've been covering women's college flag football on the NAI level since they've started, and has announced a couple of games, including the national championship here from the last couple of seasons. So he's watched plenty of football. He's very familiar with how they get down in the Sun Conference. We also have our new friend from Scouting.Flag, Jeremiah. You might have seen his Scouting.Flag. Make sure you check them out on social media, but you might have seen his Scouting Flag accounts here. I know he has one for college as well, but I know we got to meet him at Nationals at the Invitational in Florida, and so we have given him a vote. He's been watching plenty of girls and women's flag football as well here. And then we have our long-time voter, I believe, I don't know, I probably should have done some research, but internal research, that is, but he's been voting on our awards for a very long time, and that's our guy Nathan Williams, who works with the various flag organizers and even coaches Texas Fury. He also coaches Game Changer at the adult circuit. Probably needs a room for all his trophies because of how successful he's been, but he's been one of the experts of the game for a very long time. A lot of the stars you see on the college level, he's probably coached before or has some sort of contact with before, if I'm just being completely honest there. And I know he has. By the way, congrats to him. Been involved with Team USA flag as well. So obviously very lucky to have his votes for these. We invited some other media, I will say this, but was not responded to. And, you know, if you're media covering women's college flag football or girls high school flag football, we would love to invite you on to, you know, vote on these awards, because the more experts we have, the better. And I know we attempted to try to get some alum from the game, but I think we need to approach that a little bit differently. We'll talk about that in the off season, though. And so basically we all vote on these awards here. Obviously the team, or I guess the team, player, coach, right, that gets the most votes wins the award. But there is something we've always done since the beginning. We have the fan vote. And before, you know, we've put the fan vote in our Twitter account here and basically just had 4 or just a million polls going for a whole week. And we advertised these on our social media at Playmaker's Corner with a whole bunch of graphics and a whole bunch of links to those polls, but did not really get the biggest turnout, not gonna lie. And so going into next year, that'll definitely change. But the fan vote is important because if there is a tie between any, you know, leading contenders, finalists, then, you know, the tiebreaker goes to the player with the most fan votes here. So even if it's like 2-2, right, and one of those is the fan vote out of the 2, then, you know, that goes to that player who won the fan vote. And so that's why that is important there. Thank you to the fans who did vote on these awards. And so that is how the process of our awards work here. Let's honestly just go ahead and get started. Now, before we go ahead and get into our awards, I do want to talk about all PMC teams real quick. Remember, we already posted all NAI, D1, D2, JUCO, well, not JUCO yet, but soon here, D3 on our social media at Playmaker's Corner, so make sure you check that out. But we do have our all PMC team and all freshman team to announce here. I believe we actually did release all PMC, but basically goes to the players that we felt like were the best this last season, as decided upon by yours truly here at the Playmaker's Corner, myself, Cody, and Gino. Now, all PMC, let's go ahead and go down the line at quarterback. We have Warder's quarterback, Catherine Hutchinson, Kaiser's quarterback, Ava Wallace, and Kansas Wesleyan's quarterback, Shahiro Wada. At wide receiver, we have Jessica Finley of Warner, Avalon Lux-Offerman of Warner, Valerie Angebata of Barden, and Aaliyah Wood of Kansas Wesleyan. At utility, we have Jasenia Velez of Marymount, Janelle Francis of Wingate. At rusher, we have Yvonne Brussel of Wingate and Clea Gator of Weber. At linebacker, we have Mackenzie Walker of Lise McRae, Anna Vincenzini of Warner, and Nichelle Brown of Florida Gateway. And then at DB, we have Omariah Gordon of Warner, Ashley Clam of Kaiser, London Jenkins of Florida Gateway, and Jamie Spivey of Emmanuel. Now, here is our all-freshman team. We got Ava Wallace of Kaiser, Anna Anderson of Ottawa, and Gianna Reyes of St. Francis. At wide receiver, we have Olga Sotillo of Ottawa, Avalon Lux-Offerman of Warner, Honest Watson of Ventura, and Valerie Angebata of Barden. At utility, we have Janelle Francis of Wingate and Jasenia Velez of Marymount. At rusher, we have Sincere Johns of Huntingdon and Sophia Sosa of Bruden Parker. At linebacker, we have Mackenzie Walker of Lise McRae, Nichelle Brown of Florida Gateway, and Parker Bridges of Milligan. And then at DB, we have Jamie Spivey of Emmanuel, Mackenzie McMillan of La Sierra, Shania Spencer of Daytona State, and Alyssa Ramos of King. So there you go there. Those are your all PMC and all freshman teams for the 2026 season.
What is going on, y'all? This is Gino with the Playmaker's Corner podcast, and I will be sharing with y'all the winners of the yearly awards on the defensive side of the ball here for the 2026 Women's College Flag Football season. In the first of the defensive awards here for the 2026 Women's College Flag Football season, we're going to be starting off here with Rusher of the Year, and these are your 4 nominees for this award. We got Yvonne Brussel from Wingate University, Gracious Wise from Ferrum University, Kalia Gator from Weber International, and Kyla Massenberg from Eastern. And your 2026 PMC Rusher of the Year is going to go to Yvonne Brussel of Wingate University. Let's go ahead and check out each person's reasons and who they voted for here. Coach V voted for Yvonne Brussel. He had this to say: "Going into this season, I knew she was one of the top rushers in the country, and she only solidified that. Without her stats against Ottawa, Kaiser, and Reinhardt, she had 35 sacks and 42 tackles for loss. She is not going away and posted another great season, as she is already going down as one of the best rushers in women's college flag football history." I also voted for Brussel. I had this to say: "Yvonne has dominated on the NAIA level as a freshman, and now she's putting up MVP numbers on the D2 level as a sophomore. She has a determination and competitive nature that boosts the entire defense behind her as well. Whether it's a sack, a batted pass, or just forcing an awkward throw, Brussel's crazy ability to relentlessly impact the play on the rush in any way possible is what makes her a true one-of-one rusher." Cody also voted for Brussel. He said this: "Brussel still plays at a level that makes everyone's lives easier and is a one-woman wrecking crew. Her energy is also highly contagious, and unless you plan all around her, she's going to give you a hard time all day and just has some of the most absurd single-game performances of any player in any position this season." Jeremiah of Scouting Flag also voted for Yvonne Brussel here. And Corey of NAIAF Ball actually voted for Kalia Gator of Weber International. He had this to say: "Gator is a game changer and the front line on an elite defense. When Gator got going, she single-handedly ended possessions." Gator also secured the Twitter vote, making that 2 out of the 6 votes on this award, but the award is going to go to Brussel. Next up here, we have Linebacker of the Year. We got a pretty interesting mix of freshmen, veterans, breakout players, so this is going to be very interesting here. For the Linebacker of the Year, the 4 nominees are going to be Anna Pat Vincencini of Warner University, Dakota Moberg of Kaiser University, Mackenzie Walker of Lees McRae University, and Nichelle Brown of Florida Gateway. And your 2026 PMC Linebacker of the Year is going to go to Nichelle Brown of Florida Gateway. Let's go ahead and check out the votes and the reasons. Coach V voted for Nichelle Brown. He had this to say: "This may come out of the blue for fans who don't keep up with JUCO flag football, but Nichelle Brown has been holding it down for them over there and had a great season with 87 flag pulls, 8 sacks, and 9 interceptions, which was before the JUCO National Tournament where she also dominated. The postseason tournament really sold me as she balled out, and it felt like she came up with big-time pick 6 after big-time pick 6. She will do one more year at Florida Gateway, I believe, but it's not crazy to think she isn't already one of the best linebackers in the country." I also voted for Nichelle Brown. I said this: "Florida Gateway has steamrolled all of their JUCO opponents this season, and a lot of that has to do with Nichelle Brown anchoring this defense. She does all of the little things very well, while also adding a special kind of athleticism that makes her a dream linebacker for any defensive coordinator in the country. She's got the hardware as well, as Florida Gateway ran away with the national championship." Jeremiah of Scouting Flag had this to say: "Brown was the most impactful defensive player in the JUCO game, earning FCSAA Defensive Player of the Year honors and a spot on the all-conference team on both sides of the ball as a freshman. Her instincts and closing speeds were on full display throughout the season, including an interception on Florida Gateway's first defensive drive of the NJCAA championship game that immediately shifted the momentum." Cody voted for Nichelle Brown. He said, "During such a dominant season from Florida Gateway, They got contributions from everywhere, but Brown's range, aggressiveness, and lack of mistakes is what would be the basis for a linebacker cloning machine if there ever were such a thing. Now, Corey of NAIAF Ball voted for Anapat Vincenzini. He had this to say: linebacker is full of great players who can pull flags. The best, though, are the backers who don't miss flag pulls. AP don't miss them. An integral part of the scoring on a defense that scored at an incredible rate, Vincenzini was sometimes the only backer used in coverage when Lauren Clark blitzed. We often talk about corners who have islands, but Vincenzini held down her island with aplomb. And then Coach Nate voted for Dakota Moberg of Kaiser. Vincenzini did also secure the Twitter vote, giving her 2 out of the 7 votes, but it was Nichelle Brown who did secure the win here with 4 out of those 7 votes. Moving on now, we have Defensive Back of the Year. This is arguably our most stacked award, with 4 of some of the best players in all of flag football at the college level. The 4 nominees for this award will be Ashley Clam of Kaiser University, Jamise Spivey of Emmanuel University, London Jenkins of Florida Gateway University, and finally we have Omariah Gordon of Warner University. And your 2026 Defensive Back of the Year is going to go to Mariah Gordon of Warner University. She secured many of the votes here. Let's go ahead and check out who voted for who and why. Coach V voted for Mariah Gordon. He said this was a really tough vote to cast, but OMG took over at times on the defensive side of the ball in the postseason. Her speed and ball skills make her somebody that you just cannot afford to do a miscue next to. Corey of NAIAF Ball said this: OMG was the cherry on top of an elite defense. That sentence alone, when compared to the level of play, almost undersells her impact. She was a quarterback menace, coming across the field to make play after play and return pick after pick for 6 points. OMG took great throws and turned them into mistakes. Warner's defensive eraser. Cody also voted for OMG. He said this: when I think of the differences between Warner last season and this season, a lot obviously comes to mind, but especially in the Sun Conference tournament, OMG had some of the biggest momentum-swinging plays in the defensive secondary and elevated the level of this entire defense to one of a championship caliber. Jeremiah of Scouting Flag also secured the vote for OMG, and you already know I had to give OMG my vote as well. This is what I had to say. OMG might have the best hands of any DB in the entire country, regardless of division. She set the national single-season record for interceptions at Warner this year after coming off of an amazing college basketball career at Florida State. She makes it nearly impossible to throw over the top against Warner. This also puts pressure on the opposing offense as they have to build longer, slower drives in order to score, because they know an interception can happen at any time with OMG lurking in that backfield. Jamise Spivey secured the Twitter vote here with 67% of the votes there. And then Coach Nate voted for Ashley Clam of Kaiser University. Coming up next here, folks, we have the Defensive Playmaker of the Year for the 2026 season. These are the 4 players that we believe had the biggest impact on that side of the ball this year. These 4 playmakers make everyone's lives around them easier, and they also contribute to some big-time wins this year. The nominees for the 2026 Defensive Playmaker of the Year are Ashley Clam of Kaiser University, Yvonne Brussel of Wingate University, Nichelle Brown of Florida Gateway, and finally, Omariah Gordon of Warner University. And your 2026 Defensive Playmaker of the Year is going to go to Yvonne Brussel of Wingate University. Now, the voting here was pretty spread out. This was one of those awards where you really can't go wrong, but Yvonne Brussel does secure 3 votes, 1 from me, 1 from Coach V, And then the Twitter vote was the tiebreaker here that put her over the top. But let's go ahead and check out who voted for who and why. Coach Nate voted for Ashley Clam of Kaiser. And like I said, Coach V voted for Yvonne Brussel here. Let's see what he had to say. Wingate played in a conference with a lot of offensive firepower for a first-year conference. Brussel entered her second year coming off of a great freshman season and only built on that. Despite the numerous key injuries Wingate suffered, one could argue that the defensive performance of Brussel kept Wingate in a lot of the games that could have gotten out of hand. Her 10-sacked game versus Emmanuel was electric and was key in that one-score game. Eventually, the efforts of Brussel would lead to Wingate winning their conference, with other teams having to focus a lot of attention on her. She is the best rusher in the country. Definitely some high praise there from Coach V. This is what I had to say when I casted my vote here for Brussel. Wingate lost their starting QB early on in the season, and that's usually the end of all hope for most teams in this sport. Yvonne Brussel and the Wingate Bulldogs decided that wasn't going to affect their season, though. Brussel went ahead and put up over 40 sacks and led Wingate to their first ever Conference Carolinas Tournament championship. She was forcing turnovers and bad throws when she wasn't getting sacks. There's so many ways that she impacts the game, and that's what's getting her this Defensive Playmaker of the Year vote from me. And like I said, Brussel did secure the Twitter vote, which was the tiebreaker, and put her over the top. Nichelle Brown also got a vote here of Florida Gateway from Cody. This is what he had to say. If there was one athlete on the defensive side of the ball I could trust to take over a game, it would be Nichelle Brown. She consistently turned defense into offense, and from the backer spot and having the ability to swarm the whole field, I gotta go with Nichelle Brown. Corey of NAIAF Ball voted for Mariah Gordon of Warner. He said this: when you look for a defensive playmaker, you want someone who changes the game and the numbers on the scoreboard. OMG was that in spades, with several pick sixes and setting up several others with the pick portion, but laddering the ball to get someone else in position. Her coverage allowed others on defense to get chances to make plays, and in man was as good as any DB in the country. So definitely some high praise there from Corey. But your Defensive Playmaker of the Year in the 2026 Women's College Flag Football season will be going to Yvonne Brussel of Wingate. Congratulations to everyone that was nominated here, though. Had some amazing seasons, and we look forward to covering it all next year.
All right, now let's go ahead and get into the offensive best position awards here. We got best utility, best wide receiver, best quarterback. Let's start with utility here. Utility was a little interesting. Corey and Nathan decided to hold out on voting because just realistically, they did not really get to watch too much film on anybody here. So it is going to come down to myself, the other PMC guys, Jeremiah, and the fan vote, which is why you got to vote if you are a fan. But let's start with the finalists, starting with Ashton Weirley out of Milligan here. She had 75 receptions, 941 receiving yards, 20 receiving touchdowns, 418 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, also 804 passing yards, and 14 touchdowns with 7 picks in 22 games here. It is worth noting that when Bridget Kaiser went down with her injury and was done for the season, Ashton Weirley actually hopped in at quarterback and was able to produce pretty decently for the most part for Milligan, but really, she is utility because she got used pretty much all over the field here, and so she's definitely somebody who made it as a finalist. Now we have another player. We actually had 2 more finalists who were both they both have receiving, rushing, and pretty impressive passing stats here. Starting with the freshman from Marymount, Jasenia Velez, 1,098 rushing yards, 19 rushing touchdowns, 810 passing yards, 24 passing touchdowns to 5 picks, and then 57 receptions, 693 receiving yards, 7 receiving touchdowns in 22 games, as she did bring Marymount to another conference title here, just by doing it all for them. 1,000 rushing yards, passing yards, receiving yards. I mean, she did it all for them. and it really showed. There are times where, I mean, she wasn't really their starting quarterback. I would say that was Carol Vollmer, but, you know, if you needed her to pass it, she could. She was just a straight baller for them. Now, speaking of straight ballers, we have another freshman, this time from Wingate University. That is Janelle Francis, who had 1,001 rushing yards, 16 rushing touchdowns, 2,074 passing yards, 35 passing touchdowns, 5 receptions, 59 yards, 1 receiving touchdown in only 13 games, so that's less games than everyone else here. We'll say this. We kind of cheated, but I mean, she's here at utility because in their exhibition against Kaiser Ottawa, Reinhardt, she played mostly wide receiver because it was Taylor Swanson that started those games here, and then Francis would end up playing quarterback for the rest of the season after Swanson suffered that hand injury there. And, you know, she played well. And so, you know, she does have wide receiver stats. They just don't officially count because they were, you know, played in exhibition games and, you know, didn't want to add up all those. But regardless, she played at a very high level, and without her, Wingate, I mean, I don't know if they win the Conference Carolinas without her. And then last but not least, we have Macy Taylor of Ferrum here, another freshman, 222 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, 120 receptions though, 1,256 receiving yards, and 16 receiving touchdowns in 22 games. Often than not, it felt like she was the lead receiver in a lot of games this season. Just got a whole bunch of touches and made the most out of those as she really got them going, it felt like. And like I said, just watching some of the film and games that I was able to watch, it felt like she was the primary target most of the time. So she was able to produce a whole bunch for our Ferrum team, who had a very successful first season. But there can only be one here. Let's go ahead and go down the line with our votes, starting with Gino. He will cast his vote for Ashton Weirley. He says Ashton Weirley made it clear this season that she will do whatever it takes to keep the team afloat. She racked up over 40 touchdowns this season in just about every way imaginable, and even stepped in at quarterback and nearly secured Milligan a trip to the NAI finals in the process. This type of versatility is the very definition of what this award is about. She simply stepped up at every turn this season and put together a historic season in the process. Our guy Jeremiah at Scouting.flag goes ahead and casts his vote for Jasenia Velez here to split the vote at 1-1. But I will go ahead and split the vote at 1-1-1, voting for Janelle Francis out of Wingate. Look, for me, Jasenia Velez was a close second because of her heroics all over the field for Marymount as they went back-to-back, but I had to go Francis here. Originally was not slated to play quarterback as Taylor Swanson started those first couple tough games, but as an athlete produced regardless. She was somebody who I got to preview, and I knew that her game-changing speed would come in handy somewhere. When Swanson went down and the keys to the offense were in Francis' hands, she did not blink. She rose to the occasion as a playmaker and won them games through the air and ground. Her heroics as a versatile athlete would lead them to a title in a conference that looks to be one of the future powerhouses of women's college flag football. Cody will also vote for Janelle Francis here to go ahead and make it 2-1-1. He says this: with her team withered down to the bone, Janelle showed she was bad to the bone and put the team on her back, playing anywhere and everywhere this season that ended in the Bulldogs winning the Conference Carolinas, and a massive part due to her efforts. So there you go there. That is 2 for Janelle Francis, 1 for Jasenia Velez, and 1 for Ashton Weirley here. But there was only one that could be the fan vote winner here, and it was one of these 3 here, because Macy Taylor did get 3rd in the fan voting. But it came down to these 3 finalists: Ashton Weirley, Jasenia Velez, and Janelle Francis, because the fan vote would go ahead and get it to 2 no matter who it went to. That would basically be the tiebreaker, even though it is tied at 2-2 at most. And so your utility player of the year here in 2026 is Jasenia Velez. She actually won this vote by 63% out of 24 votes here, winning by a very big margin. And obviously you have Jeremiah of Scouting.flag who voted for her. And so even though she's tied with Janelle Francis, The tiebreaker always goes to the player with the most fan votes here, and that advantage. Janelle Francis, I believe, was actually second, so it was that close here. So there you go there. Congratulations to Marymount's very own freshman utility player, Jasenia Velez, who is your 2026 Utility Player of the Year. Now moving on to wide receiver, this was a tough one. You had a lot of receivers who produced here. Let's go ahead and start with the senior out of Kansas Wesleyan, Aaliyah Wood, 144 receptions, 1,390 receiving yards, 22 receiving touchdowns in 18 games. She produced for Kansas Wesleyan, Ashahiro Wada's top target. And then you have two receivers from Warner here, one a junior, one a senior. Let's start with the junior, Jessica Finley, 167 receptions, 1,909 receiving yards, 42 receiving touchdowns, one rushing touchdown in 24 games. I believe she has the record for receiving yards and receiving touchdowns in a game. That is all time in women's college football history. And then you have Avalon Lux Offerman, the freshman here, 177 receptions, which I believe is a record, 1,643 receiving yards, 39 touchdowns in one less game, only 21 games for Avalon compared to Finley's 24 here, but still a fantastic season, the best ever from a freshman receiver. And then last but not least, we have another freshman from Barton College. That is Valerie Angebata. If you look at the film does not lie. She is dominant, but she had 104 receptions, 1,406 receiving yards, 24 receiving touchdowns, 171 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Also had this when she subbed in at quarterback, 663 passing yards, 11 passing touchdowns, to only 2 picks in 14 games here. You know, I mean, she was lights out, just productive wherever you put her. But let's go ahead and go to the votes here, starting with the Twitter vote. That would actually go to Valerie Angebata here, who had 45%. Only 9 people voted, though, but she did get the majority right there, which is absolutely massive. But the rest of us, as it was not super close, would actually go ahead and cast our votes for Jessica Finley. Nate and Jeremiah would both vote for Jessica Finley, and then I would also vote for her. Look, the receivers here were all finalists for a reason, but for me, it came down to Jessica Finley and Avalon. Truthfully, I'll admit my bias towards Avalon, having covered her since her senior year of high school, but I will have to go with Jessica Finley. Jess Finley had a phenomenal run as she took on a massive workload in the playoffs and took on so much attention. Her regular season performance against Thomas, though, a program known for their defense and DBs, really helped sell me on casting this vote as she dominated in that game. Gino would also go ahead and vote for Jess Finley here. He says she takes this award after breaking the record for touchdowns and yards by a receiver in flag football history. She says clutch as they come, and she'll be doing it on the national stage as well for Team USA. Corey had this to say: Lux Offerman is next woman up for this award in a couple years. Jess Finley, though, is a Team USA member for a reason, an athlete in every sense of the word, yet cerebral enough to be the team's leader. You need a big catch? It's Finley. You need a first down? Go to 12. Cody had this to say about Jess Finley: going to throw my hat in for Jessica Finley, since the weapons for Warner were so bonkers, and Finley especially came out the other end extremely well in a way she could not before due to multiple brackets and doubles. She would see that just could not be thrown her way this season, and she showed what peak receiver performance can look like. And yeah, I gotta agree. I mean, she was dominant this season. By the way, still got third in the Twitter votes, second in the Twitter votes here, but I mean, with the rest of us going with Jessica Finley, I think it's obvious your 2026 wide receiver of the year is the junior out of Warner, Jessica Finley, who had a massive year, and looking forward to do her film breakdown, hopefully in the offseason as well. And then to the position that everybody loves, the quarterback position, best quarterback of the year. Let's go ahead and get it started with the freshman from Kaiser, Ava Wallace, 5,690 passing yards, 79 passing touchdowns and 23 picks, 64 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns in 21 games. Then we have the junior from Milligan, Bridget Kaiser, 4,730 passing yards, 87 touchdowns and 9 picks, 282 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns in 19 games. Gotta also keep in mind that she did have her season cut short due to injury, but before then was absolutely balling out for Milligan, having a career year. And then speaking of a career year here, we have Catherine Hutchinson, another junior, this time from Warner, and she smashed all the records. 7,865 passing yards, 163 passing touchdowns, only 12 picks, 1 rushing touchdown in 24 games. She stuffed the stat sheet. She went undefeated, and they ended up winning the national championship in part to how good she was. But last but not least, we have the senior from Kansas Wesleyan, Shahira Wada, 5,194 passing yards, 72 passing touchdowns to 14 picks, 313 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns in only 18 games here. She was super productive, and really her postseason play was got her a spot on this list because of how electric she was, especially in that win over Ottawa. But let's go ahead and get right into it here. I will say the fan vote does once again go to Shahira Wada by 44%. I mean, only 18 votes here, but still getting the majority. The second place votes, as well as where everyone else voted, goes to Catherine Hutchinson. Nate and Jeremiah both voted for her, and then, like I said, she got the second place vote in the Twitter polls. This is what Cody had to say as he cast his vote for her. Even without the end of the year result, the numbers are beyond video game, and warrant my nod at quarterback of the year. Some might argue that she has the best weapons, but not just any. Jaden Doe can find those weapons as often and play to the weapon strength in the most effective ways and routes in an undefeated season, and a number of touchdowns that might never be broken. I am voting for Hutchinson, and just for the record, this was a great year for quarterbacks. Ava Wallace played at a high level, and I'm excited to do a film breakdown episode on her game this offseason here soon. Bridget Kaiser was on a run before a tragic season-ending injury, and then Shahira Wada showed why she's an Olympic-level quarterback, and it was sensational, especially in the postseason. But in the end, I had to go Catherine Hutchinson. She shattered almost every single quarterback record imaginable, setting a new new standard for what truly is a generational run at this position and what it may look like at this position. And she set the bar right here, with the numbers that she put up. And so you got to respect that. On top of that, winning a ring and playing good enough to win a ring, love that as well. Gino said this as he cast his vote for Catherine Hutchinson. Let's not act like that wasn't the greatest season by a quarterback in NAI flag football history. She got the ring, the stats, and the signature performances to back this up from game 1 to game 24, which I agree with. Corey said this, watching Kitty, as her teammates call her anyway, up close this season was a privilege. Her grasp of Warner's offense enabled her to put up video game numbers. Every quarterback on this list has weapons. Are Hutchinson's weapons elite? Sure, but knowing how to utilize those weapons is a skill unto itself, and I got to agree here. Kaiser and some of these other receiving rooms here, they have similar receiving rooms. They have a lot of depth over there. Ottawa as well. You could probably throw in there Kansas Wesleyan, but it takes a truly special quarterback to truly know her weapons and use them to the full extent. I don't know if she could have used them any more than what she did here, but it felt like she got the most and was extremely sharp here, just playing great from the first game of the season to the end. First game of the season, obviously, first couple games, was able to air it out a little bit more. Near the end, knew she had to take care of the ball, make some big plays, and she did what she needed to do to win a national championship. And that is what we're taking in consideration here. And so there you go. That is your 2026 quarterback of the year, Catherine Hutchinson of Warner. Alrighty, now let's go ahead and move on to one of our big awards, Offensive Playmaker of the Year. we got a very, very nice history of this award dating back to 2022. Make sure you check out our website at playmakerscorner.com so that you can find all these old great award winners here in case you want to do your research and go into that. I know past offensive playmaker of the years have been Brianna Hernandez Silva, Alyssa Linkus, Ashley Clam, and Haley Young. But this year, we have a whole new group of finalists, starting with Avalon Lux Offerman. Read this before, 177 receptions, 1,643 receiving yards, and 39 receiving touchdowns in 21 games for the freshman standout. The other freshman standout that also performed well was Jasenia Velez of Marymount, who had 1,098 rushing yards, 19 touchdowns, 810 passing yards, 24 passing touchdowns to 5 picks, and 57 receptions for 693 receiving yards and 7 receiving touchdowns in 22 games, leaving it all on the field here. But, she was not our only option there. The other two actually Warner players are Warner finalists here. In the standout, Jessica Finley, who had 167 receptions, 1,909 receiving yards, 42 touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown in 24 games, breaking all sorts of records here. Then we have Catherine Hutchinson, the other junior for them, this time at quarterback, 7,865 passing yards, 163 passing touchdowns, and 12 picks, and 1 rushing touchdown in 24 games. But there can only be one. Let's go ahead and start with Corey's pick. He will go ahead and pick Catherine Hutchinson of Warner. Warner has 3 on this list, and rightly so. Lux Offerman, Just Finley, all had incredible offensive seasons. So did Lauber, OMG, Vincent Cini. But when an offense is elite, Arsenal is elite. It has to start with the QB. Only one person decides how to divide and can distribute the football. You got to go with Catherine Hutchinson, and I agree with that there as well. This is what Gino had to say about it. He's actually going to split the vote and go ahead and vote for her teammate, Jessica Finley. He says this: Jessica Finley put up the greatest season by a receiver in NAIA history on a team with an absolutely loaded receiving room. Stats and success don't lie, but just Finley's height, route running, and hands make her borderline unguardable. Like I said before, her ability, or for her being able to stand out on such a talented receiving core, is a big sign of how brilliant Finley is on the field. So there you go. That splits it at 1-1. But Nate Williams will go ahead and vote for Jessica Finley as well to go ahead and make it 2-1. I figure at this point, this is probably a good opportunity to say who won the fan vote, and that was actually Jasenia Velez, winning 44% of the fan vote out of 18 votes here, having a great season for Marymount. So as it stands right now, you have 1 vote for Jasenia Velez, 2 votes for Jessica Finley, and 1 vote for Catherine Hutchinson. But I will go ahead and vote for Catherine Hutchinson as well. Look, in the past, I've usually tried to use my vote to separate Opoi and MVP, but this year it is hard to deny a potential MVP my Opoi vote. While there are many weapons on this Warner team, Hutchinson found a way to distribute the ball well and play at a very efficient level. And then Cody will go ahead and seal it right here with Catherine Hutchinson, saying, "This baller just made the impossible look easy at times, and I cannot deny Opoi, so someone who maybe just had the greatest offensive season of all time." And I gotta agree there. I definitely see the arguments for Avalon, Jasenia, and Jessica Finley, but Catherine Hutchinson had the greatest season out of any quarterback, so in my opinion she should be Opoi, and she is your 2026 offensive playmaker of the year, the junior quarterback from Warner, Catherine Hutchinson.
Hey everybody, it is one of your hosts for this episode, the finale, really we should call it, of the 2026 women's college flag football season. I am recording in a bit of an odd spot, so if it sounds odd, that is why, as I am between places right now in the middle of a move. But regardless of that, these players really moved us and people around the country this season here with great performances up and down, left and right, all over the field. Really just a classic case of a historic season here And I want to give a shout out to Coach V as well as Gino. Both of those guys attacking the positions as they pertain, as well as taking the positions that they covered in Defensive Playmaker and Offensive Playmaker of the Year here. But without further ado, I get to kind of talk about some of these specialty awards, introduce these candidates and what they achieved this season. And the very first one that I am going to go over is actually Newcomer of the Year. Now, this goes to the highlight freshman of the year here. There are some great candidates, and you've already heard a lot of these candidates in other categories here. So I want to talk more about what the story was for them heading into these situations rather than focusing too much on their stats, although I'll still touch on them just a little bit here. But as far as some of the best freshmen to come in this very opening year here, obviously we released an all-freshman team, and it took a lot of consulting here, but ultimately we landed on these 4 candidates. You're going to hear these candidates again and again, and you've already heard them on this episode. But without further ado, the very first place that I'm going to start is in the Conference Carolinas with A1 Valeriange Bada here from Barton College. Now, this school had a very successful season. They wound up, in the semifinals of the Conference Carolinas tournament here. And, they really impressed this year. And Bada was a huge, massive part of that, being able to do literally everything you could possibly ask a player to do on the football field. Now, she is definitely an athlete and a receiver first, in my opinion here, but she did everything that you could ask once again, as, despite her receiving statistics notching 104 receptions, 1,400 yards, 24 touchdowns, I think also part of what really puts her above the rest of her peers is the 2 rushing touchdowns, the 11 passing touchdowns to just 2 interceptions, the special teams capabilities with a punt return for a touchdown and over 200 yards there. You also have her defensive statistics, 17 picks across 14 games, 6 defensive touchdowns, 46 tackles, 5 of those for loss, 26 pass breakups. I mean, just everywhere you could look on a football field is where she was, and she was absolutely critical in Barton's season. Barton with some very signature wins throughout her year and with big performances in some of those games. Some of those that I would like to highlight include the likes of the Chowan games, where she collected a lot of her passing touchdowns. You also have, against some of the heavyweights of the conference, like Elise McCray, 185 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. And still 134 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns in the Conference Carolinas tournament in the final game of their season, still giving the eventual conference champions Wingate problems on the offensive side of the ball, and obviously just being extremely disruptive on the defensive side of the ball as well. Just a fantastic season from a fantastic player, and that's Valeriange Bada from Barton as one of our candidates for Newcomer of the Year. Another freshman who is absolutely phenomenal in her debut season was Florida Gateway's Nichelle Brown. Now, Nichelle here, obviously, Florida Gateway ends up winning the JUCO championships that were hosted out there in Chicago, and her performances in those games were nothing short of indescribable. Honestly, I think is where I end up sitting with these, just because, I mean, any single play that she could make on the defensive side of the ball, she was making. She also had a pretty good workload on the offensive side of the ball as well. And, as far as being one of the top receivers on this team, as she led the team in yards, at least in the regular season, in yards. She also notched 15 touchdowns, a lot of point conversions here. But defensively, I think, was just the heart and soul of this defense. Led the team in tackles, pretty high up there in tackles for loss. Also got a ton of sacks. had some pass breakups, a lot of interceptions, and pick sixes. And this was before she went on an absolutely terrorizing spree through the postseason. And that is why she's not only in here, but in other defensive categories, is she really was just the heart of one of the top 5 teams in the country, probably no matter who you ask, for their defense, absolutely anchoring it down and getting it done in all facets of the game, crashing down in the run game, deflecting passes and disrupting, the quarterback in the pass game, and just really being a game wrecker from sideline to sideline and from line of scrimmage to defensive secondary. And that is Nichelle Brown with her absolutely high impact for Newcomer of the Year. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, well, this freshman class of quarterbacks was one of the most talented that we've seen, and that is true, yet only one of these elite female athletes is going to be into the rotation here, and that is Ava Wallace of Kaiser. Once again, just one of the titans of the game here and everything that she's accomplished up to this point, and this year was no different, helping lead this team as a freshman, mind you, to a national championship performance here, and also just putting on an absolute clinic in the Sun Conference. I think that this team does not, it's kind of insane, the run of quarterbacks that this squad has had, and, Ava Wallace, you could see the difference in this team from when she was on the field to when she was off the field, and I think that was evidenced in the games where, like the Ottawa game where she kind of missed that latter half, and just what this team's ceiling is with her versus without her is a massive testament to who she is as a player. And I think even more so kind of to focus on her legacy and just the legacy of Kaiser. The expectations are always extremely high. You look at Jasmine Roden, Haley Young, they all kind of went through, left their mark on the game. Haley Young did her time, waited her turn, came in, made plays, and it was no different with Ava Wallace, who came in, led them to an incredible season, led them to a Sun Conference runner-up and a national championship runner-up, which I know for some Kaiser folks that might seem jarring in some ways, but to have that sustained success does not just come, it's obviously a culture thing, but additionally just who you have under center matters so much, and Ava Wallace was just absolutely critical to that success from her position. She also, added a lot of, just made defenses play the whole field. Threw for nearly 80 touchdowns, over 5,600 rushing yards. She also was running just a little bit here, getting 3 touchdowns with her legs, just kind of at opportune times, and did a good job at, maximizing all of her receivers, spreading the ball out, and, just letting all these playmakers make plays. And for that, so proud and so excited to announce Ava Wallace as one of our Newcomer of the Year candidates. And finally, with Newcomer of the Year, our last candidate is Colorado's very own Avalon Lux Offerman, but obviously on the college level, she is repping the Warner Royals, and we were warned by Coach Mims that she was one of the best freshman prospects he had ever seen, and made the proclamation that she was going to be the best in the country. And boy, do the insane numbers that the Royals put up back that up, as she was absolutely lighting teams up and did not suffer in a very crowded receiver room with some of the best in the country. She was able to step up and perform at a high level and just really go nuts for the Royals this year. And, part of the numbers will back that up. As far as what she was able to accomplish this season, she recorded over 170 receptions on the year here, and went for 1,600 yards and 39 touchdowns through the passing attack. Just absolutely dynamic. Could not be left alone one-on-one, but with all the weapons that the Royals had, she had to be, and she scorched people alive. And so those are the candidates: Avalon Lux Offerman, Ava Wallace, Nichelle Brown, and Valerie Ainge-Bada. And here is how the voting played out. And I would just like to remind everyone that you, the listeners, did have a chance to go on to Twitter or X and vote. It looks like we're going to reroute that a little bit next year just because the involvement was so low, and we definitely want y'all to be featured more in our decision making. But there were a handful of you who did go on and vote, and y'all expressed. Valerie Ainge-Bada got 28% of the votes here. Meanwhile, 29% went to Avalon Lux Offerman. But coming in at first place for the fan vote was Ava Wallace of Kaiser with 43% of the votes here. That is going to be good enough for the fan newcomer of the year, which I think is a pretty neat crown in and of itself. Now going to some of our other voters, we have Corey of NAIAF Ball here, who is going to cast a vote for Avalon Lux Offerman, tying it up 1-1. Granted, the Twitter vote would still make it a lead in the tiebreaker sense, but Corey said, quote, Avalon, despite being a freshman, slotted into a veteran receiving corps at Warner and rose to the challenge. The Warner staff allowed her to focus solely on playing wide receiver with fantastic results. Over the years, she became an increasingly savvy wideout, putting the offense in advantageous positions whenever possible. She's on pace to be the next elite Warner wide receiver, end quote. And so that was from Corey. So that ties it up. But once again, as I said before, the Twitter vote goes to the tiebreaker here. But we have Jeremiah of Scouting Flag who weighed in on these and is going to pull Avalon ahead here by casting a vote for her as newcomer of the year. But Nathan Williams, one of the top coaches around, if you ask me, is going to swing it right back to Ava Wallace, and that ties it up 2-2. But with the Twitter vote, it makes it a tie. So really, what it comes down to is where we here at PMC ended up weighing newcomer of the year between myself, Gino, and Coach V. And it was a 3-0 slide in favor of Avalon Lux Offerman, your 2026 Playmakers Corner newcomer of the year. And I'm going to go ahead and express my thoughts while reading Gino and Simon's here. You know, I'm going to speak from personal experience as someone who coached against Avalon. She's been a problem since day one. And Mims delivered on his proclamation that she was the best freshman in the country, in my opinion. So I saw eye to eye with this promise from about a year ago, a little under a year ago, heading into the fall of this season. Meanwhile, Gino said, quote, another no-brainer, referencing some of his other votes, in a year where we saw by far the most freshmen make an impact of any season in flag football history, Avalon Lux Offerman stands alone. Why is that? Maybe because she set the national single-season record for receptions this season, or maybe it was because she carried the momentum into the playoffs and got selected to the all-tournament team and got a national championship ring. That's not even mentioning her being second in the nation in yards or receiving touchdowns at 1643 and 39 respectively, end quote. And finally, Coach V said, quote, I may never be able to express truly how proud I am, but Avalon had the greatest year from a freshman receiver in women's college football history, if not one of the greatest receiver seasons ever. And it means something to me that she is from our state of Colorado. This was an excellent freshman class, and I want to shout out Ava Wallace, who was, as advertised and more, the next great Texas quarterback isn't DJ Lagway, Jackson Arnold, or Keelan Russell. It's Ava Wallace. If Avalon did not put up the numbers she did at receiver, then Ava would have been my vote. But to put up these numbers as a freshman receiver in the Sun Conference is incredibly tough to do, end quote. And so that is going to officially crown the Royal of Warner, Avalon Lux Offerman, as your 2026 newcomer of the year from Playmaker's Corner. And we keep the good times rolling here as I am going to transition to our next award, that being an award similar in nature to Newcomer of the Year, but more focused on those players that took a gigantic step and broke out onto the scene. I'm talking about the PMC Breakout of the Year, Breakout Playmaker of the Year. These are players that were on rosters before or that were transferred in and made some noise. The candidates this year included the likes of Dakota Moberg, the two-way monster for Kaiser here. Honestly, stepped up and helped try and fill a void here that was left behind by a one Kennedy Foster from last year. I mean, you look at her numbers prior and you look at them this year, and it's just two different players, honestly. And Moberg, honestly, highly impressive, did phenomenally well here, leading the team in receiving yards, actually, as well as tackles for the Seahawks, and was absolutely critical to this team's success en route to a national championship appearance. You also have one of our Rusher of the Year candidates in Kalia Gator of Weber here, the leading sack artist in NAIA, and just somebody who really, really helped this Weber team on the defensive side of the ball, absolutely blowing up the run game and terrorizing quarterbacks all across the Sun Conference, also having great games against the best in the Sun Conference, like a Warner, like a Kaiser, just really turning it up and showing that she can adjust her level of play depending on the opponent and being able to just take it up a notch from there. Now, this next player here I do want to talk about is out of Lise McCray here. So we have a D2 appearance, and that is Natalia de Leon Hernandez here. She really, really stepped up here as far as what her role was on this team and what it was before. Now, she transferred from William Woods here, and in her first year there, she had a solid season, but it was not anything to, I don't want to say it was nothing, but it was definitely less than it was this year. And I think that that's always the important context of these breakout players of the year is what do their stats look like this year compared to last year, and what was that growth and that breakout like? So, we look back at her year with William Woods, and she had still a solid season, 263 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns, right? Little bit of punt return, stuff like that. However, you look at what she was able to do on the D2 level this year and the role that she took on, and she quickly ascended the ranks as one of the best players on this squad here, and really just was absolutely critical to this team's success as she led the team in receiving yards with 1,103 yards. She also did that on 67 receptions for a very high average yards per catch and 22 touchdowns. So, quintupled her statistics from last year to this year, and I think that that's just really important to say. Also, just to go back and reference some of these other top level players and what their growth looked like here, you got to obviously take a look at Moberg here. When you look at her stats from last year, she did not even break 200 yards receiving in her debut. She only racked up 187 yards and 4 touchdowns. That jumped up to 1,351 yards, 14 receptions to 99 receptions, mind you, and 4 touchdowns to 16 touchdowns. And then obviously, you also have to look at the defensive side of the ball. She got in, but she went from 0 interceptions to 8 this year, with 2 of those being pick sixes, and 18 tackles, all the way up to 166 solo tackles, 175 total. 4 for loss, 2 sacks as well. So once again, just kind of insane and unpredictable spike in growth, I think is probably the big thing to take away from these breakout players of the year. When we look at Kalia Gator here, she's actually a sophomore, and I want to say is a multi-sport athlete. So this was her first year in full action on the flag football course. Hence the reason she's in Breakout is because she's not a freshman. But She did notch 31.5 sacks and 32.5 tackles for loss in her first year. And finally, our final breakout candidate of the year is from the national championship team, Mariah Gordon here. And so this athlete is very interesting. Actually, you could look her up and watch her Florida State basketball highlights. And Tim Mims here was able to get her to come in as a grad transfer here and break out. Now, she did play flag football back in the day, which will be alluded to if you listen to the positional segments as well. But really, just what she was able to do coming in as far as being one of the best safeties and one of the best receivers in the country. Finished with 14 touchdowns from 0 last year, obviously. And then you look at the fact that she had 19 interceptions, just one of the best forces in flag football. And she came in from the basketball side of things. So the way that this worked out here is you did have Dakota Moberg picking up 9% of the Twitter vote. You had Kalia Gator getting 27% of the Twitter vote. And then you had OMG, Mariah Gordon of Warner, picking up 28% of the Twitter vote, but that would be second place. And your fan PMC Breakout Player of the Year is Natalia Hernandez de Leon. Shout out to Natalia and everything that she was able to do in her massive leap forward from this past season. But unfortunately for her, it would be a landslide in favor of OMG, as Nate, Jeremiah, Corey, Simon, Gino, and myself all voted for her, with me saying, quote, "I was warned but still wasn't prepared for the level of impact and importance Mariah would have for the Royals. She obviously dominated no matter where she was, but the TD pass in the national championship was just the cherry on top for me to push her over the edge in this category." Gino said, quote, "First year in college flag football scene, and OMG is a national champ record holder and national tournament MVP. That's a breakout player if I've ever seen one." And finally, Simon, to represent the PMC side of things, said, quote, "If you're from Florida, you already knew how good OMG was, but to have her come out and play at such a high level, backing it all up and more, is still incredible regardless." Corey here, continuing off of prior statements earlier in this episode, is, "What can I say about OMG that I haven't already said? She came in and immediately competed at an elite level at one of the most cerebral positions, single high safety. There was no safety net. She was the safety net." And after Coach Nate cashed in his vote, I'm going to bring it home with Scouting Flag, Jeremiah here, who said, quote, "Anyone that comes in their first season and earns All-American honors and tournament MVP will get my vote for Breakout of the Year. The sport is better off after just 1 year of OMG," end quote. And I just think that's such an eloquent way to put that, is, putting into perspective, what do these players leave behind? How do they shape the structure of the game? What do they change? What waves do they cause? And OMG obviously just came in and was a high-level contributor and integral piece to an undefeated historic season that saw the first of the NAIA championships national champion, but the first ever college flag football national champion that was not Ottawa. And I just think that that's an important piece of history, is the ones who break that streak. You think of the NFL, or at least when I think of the NFL, I think of the Jets and just how iconic that team was. And the Royals are kind of to college flag football and the NAIA what the Jets were in that scene. And OMG, you can't tell the story without Mariah Gordon. Obviously, one of the best nicknames in athletics, honestly, if I could think about it. And, it's just so crazy seeing how the game, just thinking about how different the story might be if she wasn't here. And to know that she was in basketball and competing at a high level and a very successful basketball player at Florida State, and then comes over to flag football and shares her talents with this sport, means so much. And I just want to shout out Scouting Flag, as well as just everybody who helped contribute to these polls. But I think that he just really puts it into perspective what her contributions meant and why she is our PMC 2026 Breakout Player of the Year, Omariah Gordon, aka OMG. And for the first time ever, I am super proud and excited to introduce the Iron Woman of the Year award here. This award was, after many discussions as to what the most valuable playmaker should be, we wanted to find a way to value the two-way playability on the college flag football scene, just because we don't feel that the most valuable playmaker is always somebody who plays two ways, but sometimes it is. But for this instance, we have decided to make it a category of its own because these are players in a category of their own as far as what they're able to do on both sides of the ball, how important they are on both sides of the ball, and just, ultimately what their capabilities are and how much they mean to their teams as well. So with that in mind, we are going to have quite a lineup of candidates here, but it is going to be 3 candidates from the Sun Conference being represented here, as well as one from the Conference Carolinas. You already heard about this one in our Newcomer of the Year discussion, and that is Valerie Bada here, who, like I said, on both sides of the ball, absolutely nuts. Cannot take her off of the field here. And, just offensively contributed to 37 touchdowns. 37 touchdowns. 2 rushing, 11 passing, 24 receiving. Now that alone is basically an MVP candidacy, but you have to take into effect what she did on the other side of the ball. And I'm not talking about special teams, despite her also having a touchdown there. She had 6 touchdowns on 17 interceptions, just absolutely critical on both sides of the ball, willing Barton to win some games here in just some signature performances. I want to just talk about a game like what she had against the likes of Chowan, where she threw, caught, ran, did all that. Also had 6 tackles, had a tackle for loss, forced some turnovers. I mean, just absolutely bonkers performance here as far as what she was able to do all over the field. Then I also look at a game like Mount St. Mary's, where she had 2 interceptions for 39 return yards. But when you look at what she was able to do in that very same game on the offensive side of the ball here, you have to realize that she threw for a touchdown and showed some versatility in that way. And just some other games where she had great impact. I'm looking at the Lise McCray game where she also had 2 interceptions, but also 2 receiving touchdowns on 185 receiving yards on 12 receptions. Just two-way impact that really you can't find anywhere else, especially with that impact coming so heavy in the secondary for Barton College. Wanted to give her a special shout out in this segment here. Another very special athlete that we always are looking to get involved in, especially with just the absolute grit and determination that she has, is Weber's very own Riley Bolser, the RCX national champ here, who had a fantastic season coming off of an injury. I know that it's a little played out to continually bring that up, but really, I mean, the injury that she had was kind of foul. And so for her to come back, catch over 1,000 yards, record 16 touchdowns, also be this team's leading tackler, I want to say, at 122 tackles, not only just getting tackles, but also getting some in the backfield with 7 of those. She had a couple of sacks. She had 7 interceptions. I mean, just anything that you could ask her to do, she picked right back up where she left off and some for the Weber Warriors. And that is Riley Bolser here. You want to talk about some of her performances here that were some of her most impactful. I mean, defensively, she had a 3 interception game against Florida Memorial. In that very same game, they were able to kind of keep her a little limited, but still she caught a receiving touchdown. So I think that that's important here. You look at a game against St. Francis, where she caught for 148 yards on 12 receptions and also notched 2 touchdowns. And it was also her single season high in tackles with 16 of them, as well as a tackle for loss and just flying around the field sideline to sideline there. Also on the 10th against Siena Heights, you had a 12 tackle performance, or 14 total, 12 solo, 2 of those in the backfield, also an interception in that game, and 4 receptions for 39 yards. I mean, just multiple games where she was asked to do the absolute most on both sides of the ball. This Kaiser game later in the year, 11 receptions, 76 yards. Meanwhile, on the defensive side of the ball, 7 tackles in this game, also had an interception. I mean, just multiple instances of her being able to contribute on both sides of the ball is why she is in this conversation and why Weber was in multiple conversations this past year. Shout out to Riley Bolser. This next player is one that you've already heard from, and that is Breakout Player of the Year candidate Dakota Moberg here. Now, obviously, Dakota led Kaiser in receiving yards as well as tackles. 175 total tackles, 2 sacks, 12 pass deflections, 99 receptions, 1,351 yards, and 16 touchdowns. Now, if I were to ask you what were some of her best performances on both sides of the ball, then you would be looking at a few different games here. But I think that you have to look at her high tackle games like Wingate, Point, Bruton Parker, Weber International, Warner again, Kansas Wesleyan, Warner finally in that national tournament. All of those double-digit tackle games. A few of those you have her forcing sacks. A few of those you have her forcing interceptions. You have a multiple interception game against the likes of Reinhardt. And in a lot of these games, she's also just doing a lot of damage on the offensive side of the ball as far as her catching goes and just everything else that she was able to do. You know, she put up in that same Reinhardt game 97 yards and a hat trick of touchdowns. In that Wingate game, she caught a touchdown. If you look at the St. Francis game earlier in the year, she had 110 yards. And you look at her contributions against Warner, I mean, in one of the games against Warner, she did notch a touchdown as well as a ton of those tackles. You also look at the national tournament and what she was able to do against Kansas Wesleyan, 114 yards, just unstoppable for Dakota Moberg on both sides of the ball, and somebody that you always have to keep an eye on. And then finally, a very familiar name in awards for this show here is Anna Pat Vincenzini here. She was the, 4th leading receiver for this Weber team, 98 receptions, 1,187 yards, and 30 touchdowns, and also having one of the most unguardable routes in the entire country. And she was also the leading tackler on this team with 116 solo and 124 total, with 3 tackles for loss and 14 interceptions to go with 16 pass breakups, definitely holding up her end in the pass game. Meanwhile, Lauren Clark was playing more downhill in the run game, and so with those two at linebacker, just made for an absolute nightmare for teams. And, when you look at some of the games that were some of her best of the season, I mean, the national championship definitely comes to mind as she barely left the field in this game. And we're kind of used to it, but I mean, it was a brutal game. I'm not even going to try and dance around it. And she did not complain. She left it all out there. She made the game-winning or the eventual game-winning touchdown catch, and that's in conjunction with the PAT, obviously. But, I mean, either way, that was a big game where she caught a touchdown in a very, very low-scoring game. 5 receptions, one of the main contributors, and then you look at what she did defensively. She had 8 tackles, which was it felt like she was everywhere on the field, which is very important. In the first Kaiser game, she also notched 2 interceptions, which is pretty hype and obviously was important in that regard. You look at some of her big receiving performances against the likes of Siena Heights. She had 111 receiving yards as well as a trio of touchdowns. And in that same game, or I should say that same day, later against Florida Memorial, 5 tackles. She also had 10 tackles against St. Francis, which was a huge game. You look at all of her interceptions. I mean, she recorded an interception in almost every single game. I'd say half of every game this year, and was just a game wrecker in that regard. So, former MVP candidate Anna Pat Vincenzini, obviously in the discussion here. So with all of those candidates in mind, where I typically like to start is with where you, the voters, sided with here. So the Twitter vote here in 4th place, Anna Pat Vincenzini with 7%, Dakota Moberg with 13%, and Riley Bolser coming in 2nd place at 33% means that your fan selection for PMC Iron Woman of the Year goes to Valerie Ainge-Bada. Congratulations, Valerie, for winning those votes. 47% of the votes going to her for Iron Woman of the Year. Meanwhile, here we had a couple of votes going towards Weber's very own Riley Bolser. You had Nathan Williams voting for Riley, as well as Coach V saying, quote, "It was between Anna Pat and Riley for me, but I will go with Riley. The numbers she put up are impressive, but it is even more impressive considering the injury she has bounced back from, as well as the younger quarterback room she worked with. Riley's battle for adversity is extremely commendable, and I am proud to cast my first ever vote for Iron Woman of the Year for her," end quote. And so Riley currently sits in the lead 2-1 over Valerie Ainge-Bada here. But after Jeremiah casts his vote for Anna Vincenzini, as well as Corey here of NAIF Ball, expressing similar feelings as Coach V, saying, quote, "I'm torn between AP and Riley. Riley is the heart and soul of a Weber team that took home the RCX tournament trophy. However, Anna Pat has been the linchpin of the Warner team all season, the wide receiver who never dropped balls, and the linebacker who never missed flags. I'm not sure I ever really saw her come off the field until Warner was up by about 60 points, end quote. So, with Nathan Williams and Coach V going Riley Bolser, and Corey and Jeremiah going with Anna Pat Vincenzini, that would put this at a 2-2 tie, with Riley Bolser having the tiebreaker thanks to you, the fans. But Gino here is going to help pull Anna Pat back into the lead, saying, quote, "It's AP. As much as I want to go with Bolser here, Anna Pat is darn near top 3 in the nation at both positions she plays. She has a choice route that is not only unguardable, but is also the route that secured them the national championship. She also just doesn't miss flagpoles ever. She can take any receiver in a one-on-one scenario, and then you combine that with her amazing hands. This award might as well be named after her after the career she just had," end quote. And with that 3-2 lead, that gives me and myself the power alone to basically decide who brings us home, as if I vote for Bolser, then she wins with the tiebreaker. But if I vote for Anna Pat, then she takes away. Or I could vote for Moberg and Valerie Ainge, and that also secures the winner of this award. However, I am going to cast my vote for Anna Pat Vincenzini. She is sensational, and she is the Iron Woman of the Year. This team straight up is not undefeated, and depending on how things shake out, maybe not champions without Vincenzini. I want to bring up something that's really important here, and that is that Anna Pat was the first, and she was the mold, and she has so much to do with the culture of this team. You know, I think that obviously you look at this Royals team over the past few years, you look at Lauren Clark, who came in via transfer and definitely was the vocal leader on defense. And then I also think that in almost an opposite but balanced way, Anna Pat is the, quiet, yes, coach, can do anything that you ask player. I've seen her play for years. I've seen her dominate at some of the same things. I've seen her grow at a lot of the same things. And I think that the wide receiver room, like a Jessica Finley, like a Avalon Lux Offerman, like a Maggie Lauber, I don't think that they are as successful without Anna Pat. And I also think that her selflessness plays a major part in what Warner is able to do, what they've been able to do, and how they've been able to build this culture as she, was once the number one receiver on this team. She once led in receptions and yards and was a most valuable playmaker winner, and had tons of hype and was on a high pedestal and highly mediaized. But, she stepped back to that third or fourth receiver role and allowed others to feast, and then stepped up more on defense and stepped up more with flagpoles and more on one-on-one and more in coverage, and just continued to garner these responsibilities and allow her teammates the opportunity to make plays, and showed a high level of trust that I think is a reflection of the culture, not only that Mims built, but also that Anna Pat Vincenzini helped build. And I think that is something else that definitely sways me in this Iron Woman voting of the year, but also to echo Gino's sentiment, when they needed her to be a wide receiver, she made the play. She made the biggest touchdown grab of the year on a play that feels unguardable only when she runs it. And despite the high praise at receiver, she's even better on defense this year. And so with all that in mind, I gotta go with the former PMC MVP for the first ever PMC 2026 Iron Woman Award winner, Anna Pat Vincenzini of the Warner Royals.
All right, now I'm going to go ahead and interrupt Cody's flow here. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about our final PMC rankings of the year. This is obviously post-season, and, we're not going to take in consideration any of the transfers or, movement that's been going on so far. I'm sure we'll do an update episode at some point midway through the off-season about all the movement, because there has been a lot going on. We have basically taken every team at face value after their season ended, and just looking at the squad and, where they finished and where we feel like they are ranked. And so myself and the others rank these teams 1 through 25. If anybody ranks a team number 1, they get 25 points, and then so on and so on. I add up the points, that's how I average it out, and we go from there. Now, some of us obviously a lot of us have different reasons from others, and so we will make sure to go ahead and clarify that in our reasons. So if you hear us talking about us, moving a team over, the other or whatever, we have our personal rankings, and then our PMC rankings are the averaged ones. And I will say this, shout out womenscollegeflagfootball.com. Make sure you check them out. I don't have the reasons for them. I thought I did, but I don't think these are updated. So there you go there. I just have Cody and Gino's for right now, but make sure you check out their website, because I know they be posting their reasons there and on their social media. But we're gonna go right at it here. Let's talk about the teams that were just outside. We have Huntington, Thomas, Gallaudet, Wallace State, Ventura, Irvine Valley, and Simpson. Cody was the only one who had something to say about one of these teams, and that was Gallaudet, saying that that said, this team, talking about Gallaudet, was truly spectacular, and I have no qualm putting them in the top 25 with their skill production against Ferrum and a close loss to Penn State Harrisburg in the conference championship. So there you go there. But let's go ahead and go into our top 25, starting with Villa Maria. They go ahead and crack our top 25 here, making it in women's college flag football. Actually, ranked them pretty high here. I want to say near the top half of theirs, and so I don't think any of us voted for them, but I know they had a pretty successful season down there, so there you go. At 24, though, is Lindsey Wilson, who does move down a couple of spots here, but, for a first-year program, still finishes inside our top 25. A lot of promising pieces over there. I will be doing some film breakdowns this off-season, and so I would be doing an episode featuring Amaya Pablo and probably Emily Good as well, if I could get my hand on some film here, and just break down what they do best and why are they so great here, because I do think they have a bright future. They have a great coach over there who's a proven winner down in Florida. Maya Pablo is obviously a proven winner and one of the great freshman producers this last season. Even though she didn't make our all-freshman team, obviously still very close to making it and competing with other players around the country. Moving on at 23, we have Penn State Harrisburg, who does move up from being unranked. Your conference champions here in the United East, beating Gallaudet here. Cody said very quietly, this team played Gallaudet damn near better than anyone in the season and capped it off with an upset win for the United East Championship. Doing my best to not let the champions go unnoticed, and absolutely, they played Gallaudet pretty close, even though they lost the first couple times, but they won where it mattered in the conference championship. And officially, I believe, the first United East Conference championship or champions ever. So there you go. That obviously means a lot to them. They make our top 25. At 22 is Aurora University out of Illinois here, who does move down a couple of spots here. Cody says this team came out and beat Alabama State and went toe-to-toe with Weber in a rematch that has the staff and roster hungry for more. This, on top of being champions of their conference, makes me give them a shout here, and I gotta agree. Very decent postseason, very good postseason from them, especially for a first-year program. You gotta feel good about what you're able to put down and be able to build on from there. Now at 24 is Lise McRae here. They stay right here. This is a comment that Gino threw out there. Like I said, we were trying to keep these teams mostly at face value after the season, not trying to talk too much about transfers and departures, but Gino did say losing your head coach as well as some key transfers to the portal was devastating, but it was still a successful first year for Lise McRae, and I gotta agree. Now, it's obviously going to be a very different team going into next year. That's got to be noted, but it was a good year with this squad, and I think that is fair to say. At 20 is Daytona State, who moves down a spot. Nobody really had anything to say here, but, they lost just badly to Florida Gateway after making it to the JUCO National Championships again here. And so I think the big storyline going into next season is, can they build a team that can beat Florida Gateway? We will see here. Every team, they have their day in the light and they get to win a whole bunch, but, you never know, right? You never know when that time might be up. And so for Daytona State, they are going to be the ones who decide when that time is up, in my opinion, and they got to make some moves here to get better. Now, at 19 is Roberts Wesleyan, who moves up a couple of spots here out of New York. Cody said this team had a perfect season, which puts them in very exclusive company. They were primarily dominant, and then being tested at the end, still pulling out wins, I think is a testament of the squad. Only reason they're not higher is it's hard to scale with so many other first-year teams. Basically, Cody is talking about strength of schedule, and I agree there. Would love to see them travel a bit more. Obviously, year one's year one, but love to see them go play some NAIA teams or even go down south here. And maybe look at some of these Sun Conference teams, because I do think they got some talent. Now at 18 is St. Thomas, who dips quite a bit, down 5 spots here. Let's start with Gino. He says, let's keep it a buck. These St. Thomas players deserve better than what they got in the tournament. Between not having their head coach for the second game in a close loss to Kansas Wesleyan, or the absolute meltdown after the Ottawa game, the national tournament was a massive step back for this program, and it really didn't need to be. Ooh, so there you go. Gino brings some heat. But Cody also is agreeing with Gino and on those same lines, saying this. To some, this might be an overreaction, but truly it feels like whoever comes in will have to unravel before building with a well that feels worse than what it was left. Hashtag if you know, you know. And yeah, I gotta agree. There's definitely some drama that went down for St. Thomas, in my opinion. And I'm sure players are going to look back at this. Coaches will look back at this. I don't know if they made the most of their postseason trip. And it's an unfortunate thing to say here, but there's going to have to be some changes for sure. There are definitely some alarming, at least in our opinion, alarming stories that we heard. So it is what it is. We'll see what happens in the offseason. At 17 is Barton College. They stay right here. Cody said this just didn't quite have the gas to get past the eventual champions of the Conference Carolinas, but definitely a team that could be in contention for that conference crown next season. And yeah, like I said, I will be doing film breakdowns here. Sawyer Rigdon, as well as her receivers, Valerie Njabata and Saren Merritt. And just to name a few players, would love to do film breakdowns on them. I do have access to full film. At least as of right now, I do. So I will be making that content in the off season and featuring them and talking about how great this freshman squad is, because even though they were runner-ups, I mean, this was just such a productive season for them. I felt like they really put Carolina flag football on the map with how successful they were, and this is only the beginning. Now, at 16 is Life, who moves down a spot here. I mean, really, they didn't get to play in the postseason as they just missed out. Cody says thinks that they did not get a chance to show what they're made of in the postseason of some variety, but massive strides from the squads were nice to see. And I agree. I think, every year so far, Life has taken a step forward, a positive step forward at that. Now, we'll see where that cap is eventually. I mean, you're going to graduate players and you're going to have to start replacing different people and whatnot. But it did feel like Life got better. And, it's kind of hard to scale watching them play Sun Conference teams and, some of these squads just being so good over there. But if Life was to play other teams around the country, it probably really wouldn't be that close. And honestly, for the brand, it might not be a bad thing if they scheduled some out-of-conference games. I would love to see a Life versus Roberts Wesleyan game down on the East Coast. That would be a whole lot of fun. Now, at 15, speaking of the East Coast, we have Eastern, who moves up from being unranked. Let's start with Gino. A lot to love about the future of this program, and I gotta agree there. Cody says this squad showed just how close they are by besting Merrimack at one point and battling them hard at the end. I love what Coach Roller has built and is building over there. One of the best J spots in the country is with them, in my opinion, and this team will remain relevant heading forward after having greatly improved this past season. And yeah, I think they got some really good pieces. They got a quarterback who took a step forward here. They have a lot of athletes, Massenberg, Shell Pepper, Moyer, just to name a few players right off the bat. They're going to be fine, I think. Add on another year of development, right? Add on another good recruiting class, and it may not be far before you could be calling them some conference champions here soon. But for now, they're behind Merrimack, who is just ahead of them at 14. This is what Gino had to say. Conference champs again, and then Cody said this team showed resilience, serious ability to battle, and domination in a long season, and they ended up not only winning the Atlantic East, but doubling down as champs of the ever-so-massive ECAC put on the Jets. Color me impressed. Yeah, Merrimack, I'm going to be honest. Beginning of the season, there were some serious doubts about the production of this offense. It seemed, I don't know, it just seemed stagnant. It just was not really producing, even though they brought back a lot of players. And then as the season went on, I mean, they figured it out. Jasenia Velez was really leaned upon a whole bunch here, which, I mean, there's no surprise why she's in our consideration for awards and whatnot here. But, she was really leaned on, and it was paid off by her production. And that production ended up turning into wins for Merrimack, and they figured it out, and, were able to win the conference and then win the ECAC for the first time ever as well, and which is obviously huge. Now, let's move on here to 13. We have Ferrum, who does move down 2 spots here. Cody says this, honestly, not the way you want the season to end, but the high exposure experiences will grow this team to be a heavyweight for years to come. Gino says we were robbed of a classic between Ferrum and Weber after Ferrum somehow got upset versus Alabama State. I still don't know how they possibly lost that game here. Alabama State, they got some players over there. We'll do a film breakdown on that game here in the offseason at some point, hopefully as well. But Ferrum, I think, is going to be fine. A lot of young players. That's how that happens. When you don't have a whole bunch of experience over there. It is what it is. You got to build from your own experiences, and, that's not a bad thing. They had a lot of good ones and a lot of success in their first year. Now, at 12 is Weber, who basically just stays right here. Gino says would have loved to see this team compete for the national championship, but it was cool to see them still have some success in the other tournament that was going on. This will be a brand new team with brand new leaders next year, so it'll be exciting to see how that looks. Cody says they finished right where I left where I last left them. A perfect touch of icing on the oh my gosh, a perfect touch of icing on the career of so many Warrior lifers, and a positive cap on the end of an era in Weber. Talking about obviously all the seniors that graduated. Shout out Riley Bolser, Emma Blanco, Caitlin Sigmundy, just to name a few. Cheyenne Durand as well. You know, you got some players that have been there for a while that have held it down here, and honestly, they're so close to making the conference tournament, or not the conference tournament, the NAI Invitational, and, you know, I'll just put this down there. I kind of feel like they should have made it over another team, and I'm not going to get too specific there, but I felt like they would not have squandered an opportunity. Let's just say that, right? And even then, I mean, they have a young quarterback in Luzariana Herrera. I'm very excited to really dive into her film breakdown. I know there were some games where, you know, she was on it, she was hot, it was looking good, and then some games where she struggled, and unfortunately, you know, the turnovers were an issue at times, and it was why they lost, and it was pretty straightforward at that point. But, you know, she's grown, she's shown some flashes. Would love to see how she looks like going into year 2 here. Will be different, right? You're losing pretty much all your top receivers, but you do bring back some key players on the defense here, who you will probably need to rely on just a little bit more. But for Weber, you know, I think you could be happy if you're them with how the season ended. I mean, whenever you end the season with a win, how could you not? Now at 11 is Hope International, who does move down a spot here. Genos has this to say about Hope. Going 0-2 is obviously not ideal, but it was still a highly successful first season for Hope. I very much look forward to seeing them duke it out versus Nevada State next year here. And even though it was 0-2, you know, they competed with St. Francis at the end, and that'll be a fun game to talk about here in the offseason. Cody said this, putting the other new team fresh of a conference championship for making it out to nationals and still having room for a high ceiling. They'll just have some different comp next year that'll make things interesting. And yes, it will be Nevada State here, as it'll probably be a battle between those two squads if we had to project very, very early, but still a lot of recruiting to do and a lot of changes to go down before we can really look at that seriously, and at least give a serious prediction, I should say. Now at 10 is Milligan, who dropped 7 spots here, and you know, it's just really unfortunate. I'll go first before Cody and Gino. You know, I know they suffered some pretty bad season-ending injuries to a number of players, and at the moment, all I could say is that we hope for a speedy and a full recovery, you know, to be injured, and not only be injured, but to, you know, be hit with a season-ending injury this late in the season. One does have to wonder if that'll affect next year, and I mean, it could be too quick of a turnaround, and I feel really bad for those players over there, because I know they're great kiddos. I know they compete so hard, and for their season to end the way it did is just super unfortunate. You know, it's extremely unfortunate for them over there, considering how much success they had. And so this will unfortunately be a very much what-if type of scenario with Milligan, because it wasn't like they lost a player or two. They lost key starters that most teams would not survive without. And it is what it is. Gino had this to say: the Buffaloes ain't going anywhere. This will be a top 3 team in the NAI next year, mark my words. And then Cody had this to say: the bad luck that hit this team feels like a curse straight from mythology. I wish all the injured players from all squads speedy recoveries, but what happened to the Buffs and Milligan feels so raw, because it seemed like they were ready to have a better showing than last season. And I agree. Like I said, season-ending injuries, a lot of surgeries to have, a lot of recovery and rehab to go down over there. You hate to see it, but you're rooting for them, or we're rooting for them, and we're rooting for them to come back stronger than ever, and excited to see what that looks like here a year from now. But definitely some questions for sure going into next season, and just seeing how that whole timeline goes down. Now, moving on into our top 10, we have Wingate, who moves up a couple spots to number 9. Cody had this to say: this team stuck the landing of a ship that was losing all kinds of pieces along the way, and that's a testament to the culture, camaraderie, and grit of of a program that will not go away despite losing some good pieces. And I agree. I will say this next week, our first off-season episode, and we'll be, I don't know, maybe we'll drop more than one episode a week eventually, but I am on summer break, so I'll do what I want for now, but I will be dropping a film breakdown episode on Sailor Swanson, who played in a couple exhibition games early on for Wingate before getting hurt, and would end up medically redshirting, and then I will also do a breakdown on Ariana Akey, and I think maybe Sarah Walker as well, as they were the first commits to the University of Nebraska, coached by the Sauer sisters over there. And so I will be doing a film breakdown using some Wingate film from early on, whether they played Kaiser, Ottawa, and Reinhardt. Specifically for Sailor, I'll be using that for a film breakdown. So make sure you look out for that next week. Now, at number 8, is Nevada State here, who stays at the same spot. Cody says going to put the squad here with the talent that will be returning and incoming talent only going bigger. They will be one of the most dangerous teams in the country to look out in NAI next year. And I gotta agree with that. I don't think it's too early to say that they are going to be a contender going into next season. And we will do a film breakdown to tell you exactly why. But look out for them. At 7 is St. Francis, who moves up a couple spots. Gino says that win over Hope International cemented St. Francis as the top 8 team in the country. They are very well coached, and they are only getting started, which is scary. Cody says a good showing from one of the new squads, getting quality playmaking and experience from nationals this year, and beating out the other new teams for the top 10 spot. And yeah, this young squad, they made some noise here. They definitely made some noise here, and you gotta be impressed with that. Gianna Reyes, she showed out, and that's why she was able to make our all-freshman team, because of how good she was for this team here. And, we'll see how they're going to build on that moving forward. They have some great skill players in Harmony, Haley Witherspoon over there as well, who just barely missed, by the way, our all-freshman list here, but are definitely players to look out for moving forward. We'll say that. So there you go there, but future's definitely bright. Now at 6 is Baker here. Let's start with Cody. Not going to lie, this was kind of a disappointing end to the season, and not really the step up from last season, but depending on how the dust settles elsewhere, these Cats could open as favorites for a title next season. I would have to disagree, because pretty much Warner returns everyone, and at the time I'm recording this, which is late at night, May 26th, Coach Mims is still at Warner, and unless all those players transfer and Mims takes a job somewhere else, Warner should be the favorites moving forward. But they could be in the mix, though. Gino did say this about Baker: that K-Dub game was an awful way to end the year. No other way around it. This could be a top 2 or 3 team going into next season with the way a lot of these transfers for other NAIA schools are looking, though, and I agree with that. But eventually you gotta find a way to get it done, We'll see about that. It'll definitely be interesting to do a film breakdown on them in this off season. That'll be a fun one for sure. Just to see where it all went wrong, potentially, or what they need to be doing differently going into this next year here. Now at 5 is Ottawa, who moves down a couple of spots here. Let's start with Gino. What a brutal way to end a dynasty of monstrous proportions. It will be very interesting to see where this team is next season under head coach Abby Brown. Shout out PMC fam Abby Brown here. Congratulations to her being the new head coach for Ottawa's flag football team. In good hands for sure. Cody had this to say about Ottawa, though. Obviously, this is the end of the most historic era in college flag football so far, and the beginning of a new one as the Sours establish a superpower in Nebraska. But what a story this was, and the stretch they had with the original core that will always echo through the history of flag itself. And yeah, it's not to downplay how it ended here. They lost to a good Kansas Wesleyan team who has an Olympian on that squad at quarterback. Shihiro Owada, the next time she comes back to play flag football in the United States, I believe, will be in the Olympics. that is a very real thing. And so there's obviously no shame in that. It is what it is. All good things have to come to an end. But as we are seeing, new chapters are opening. And so we have a new chapter with Coach Abby Brown. A lot of those players will be opening up new chapters at other programs, whether it's Nebraska, Manhattan, wherever. But regardless, I mean, they're able to put together a very nice winning program here the last couple of years that, gained both fame and infamy. And, you gain infamy by winning a whole bunch, right? That's what happens. And it's really hard to hate, or it's really hard to root for a team that continues to win, right? And to be able to do that is a privilege. And so for Ottawa, hats off to the Sauer sisters, and we're looking forward to a new era where Coach Abby Brown, she's going to go ahead and put her stamp on it, and we'll see what that looks like, but we're excited for it. Now at 4 is Kansas Wesleyan, who does move up 2 spots here. Gino says it was a pleasure to see them finally take down Ottawa in the postseason. The Coyotes are very much deserving of this number 4 ranking. Cody says this version of the Yotes and the way their season ended was a culmination of years of work, culture, and ended in a signature performance from one of the titans of the sport in Chihiro Iwata, and consider this ranking as a salute towards her and the rest of the Yotes efforts from Coach Pham, Nguyen, and Snyder. And yeah, I gotta agree there. First off, gotta shout out Aaliyah Wood as well, one of the other key seniors for them. And I mean, there are other great players for Kansas Wesleyan. We could go on and on, but Aaliyah Wood was somebody that we covered coming out as a senior, played for Thomas, had some good years with them, then went to Kansas Wesleyan and had some more good years with them, obviously making our all PMC team, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. She did make our all PMC team there. So love that for her. I mean, she was an absolute dog producing on both sides of the football. Like Ottawa, they're going to be entering a new era next season without Iwata, without Wood, and we're going to see what that really looks like here. Now, at 3 is Kaiser, who moves up a couple spots here. Let's start with Cody. If any team was going to dethrone Warner, Kaiser was the one that held their own on a consistent basis. There's plenty of questions for next year, but they still end the season as the second best team in the country in my eyes. This is what Gino has to say. A different vibe here. 3 straight trips to the finals. 3 straight losses in the finals. The Seahawks got very close to taking down Warner in both games at the national tournament, but to no avail. Though the fact that Ava Wallace and Ashley Clem are not going to be here next year, Kaiser's chance at a ring might have already passed, but hopefully they prove me wrong next season. That is definitely worth putting out there. And I will be I'll reveal one of the other film breakdowns I'll be doing soon. So I know next week I'll be doing a breakdown on the Nebraska commits. I know eventually, I think in the month of June, maybe near the end here, it depends on what the UIL here in Texas rules there. Hopefully they sanction girls flag football by then at the end of June. But I do hope to do a film breakdown on some Texas Fury players. I'm looking at Ashley Clam, Lauren Clark, Ava Wallace. I know we did a film breakdown on them coming out of high school, and I want to revisit that and then obviously do an updated one on their college careers here. I think, you look at those players, especially in Ashley Clam, who is definitely building her brand empire, and I love that for her. You see all that stuff, all the glamour and whatnot and the highlights, but I think it would be really fun to just talk about specifically what makes her great, what makes her unguardable, what makes her garner all this respect on both sides of the ball. I'll do that. And then with Ava Wallace, I really respected her game this season. I am very sad to hear that she won't be with Kaiser, but I know she has some things to take care of, and would love to interview her someday here on the podcast. And then I really look forward to this film breakdown because I do think she is the next great Texas quarterback, and will carry on that legacy of great Texas football players as always. And then you have Lauren Clark, who went out on top, got a great interview with her at the end of this tournament here. She does so many things right. And I think the thing I really look forward to breaking down in her film, and I'm kind of just ranting, but oh well, it is what it is. It's the last episode of this season. But, the thing I really look forward to breaking down in Lauren Clark's film is just how Warner was able to use her all over the field and how effective she was. And so that'll be fun. But with all that being said, Kaiser, not completely out of it. You're losing a lot of players, but historically they've recruited well. You still got some quarterbacks on the roster that, it's tough losing Ava Wallace, but, you got quarterbacks that aren't that bad either and could, either be just as good or potentially better depending on how the offseason goes. And so we'll see what happens there. Now at 24, at 2 is Florida Gateway. This is what Cody says, another national championship in the books with high-level contributions across the board and from every position group with depth to show. Definitely a top team in the country. Gino says back-to-back national champs and still unbeatable at the JUCO level. Yeah, Florida Gateway, man, they're rolling right now. They got some very interesting prospects over there. I believe most of those players will play 2 years and then move on. I don't expect anybody to leave early, but you never know. We'll see. Maybe a D1 program comes out and really makes an offer that's enticing, but I think they should be poised to run it mostly back going into next season, or at least, they won't have London Jenkins, but run it back with who they have next season, and, they've been successful, and that continues, and I will be doing a film breakdown on them eventually here. It's hard to come by Florida Gateway film, but we will do that here eventually in the offseason. But at number 1 is Warner. No surprises here. Gino's note literally says easily. Cody says this team left no doubt and recorded one of the greatest seasons, and on paper might have a claim to the most talented team to take the field top to bottom. And yeah, I gotta agree there. As far as women's college football goes, they kind of feel like the best team of all time. Just super productive on offense, super productive on defense, great head coach, and they found a way to get it done here and top it all off with a ring, because it ain't no thing without a ring, and they go ahead and get that here. And also the first national championship in Warner University history, which is kind of electric. Not gonna lie, I love that. But, congrats to them once more. Super well deserving here. A lot of seniors here, or a lot of players that we covered all the way through their college career. And so love seeing them go out on top. This was definitely not, even though they went undefeated and dominated for most of this journey, it wasn't an easy one. They had to battle some adversity here in that first game, in their only game against Kaiser in the national championship. National championship game against Kaiser, I should say. It looked like for a minute that Kaiser was going to maybe force another game here. And Warner, you gotta shout out their leadership, Lauren Clark, Tim Mims, all the seniors over there. They buckled down and they found a way to win it right there, right then. And that's what champions do. They find a way to get it done right there, right then. And so congrats to them. Very well deserving as the number 1 team in the entire country. So there you go there. That'll wrap up our rankings here in the 2026 season once more. At 25 is Villa Maria. 24, Lindsey Wilson. 23, Penn State Harrisburg. 22, Aurora. 21, Lise McRae. 20 is Daytona State. 19 is Roberts Wesleyan. 18, St. Thomas. 17, Barton College. 16, Live. 15, Eastern. 14, Marymount. 13, Ferrum. 12, Weber. 11, Hope. 10, Milligan. 9, Wingate. 8, Nevada State. 7, St. Francis. 6, Baker. 5, Ottawa. 4, Kansas Wesleyan. 3, Kaiser. 2, Florida Gateway. And at number 1 is Warner.
Now for some of the very fun conversations that we get to have here at PMC is talking about the schemes that are ran by the teams, how they're able to recruit, what battles they've won, what transfers they were able to pull in, and how they were able to all piece it together on the field. And especially as people who have a stake in this as well, you have to know that we are talking about the Coach of the Year for the 2026 PMC season here. And we have some awesome candidates here, all coaches who succeeded in their own right on their own level. From Wingate here, you have Joe Schlager, the former William Woods coach, who went over to the D2 level at Wingate, recruited our very own backyard out of here in Colorado, and not only getting the absolute most out of a lot of first-year players, as well as some transfers here that he was able to tap into, but really showed his chops when it came to improvising. I mean, this roster that he finished the year with is incredibly different from the roster that he started the year with, and just a slew of injuries from one of the most talented players to come out of Colorado at the receiver position. You also had his quarterback that got hurt. The depth got thin incredibly fast. The offense had to change from the Saylor Swanson style to the Janelle Francis style, which are two very, very different looks on the offensive side of the ball, but both players were able to execute. Francis obviously stepping in with incredible play in a utility perspective and just from a pure athlete perspective, how he was able to maximize this defense and adjust according to his opponents and get just enough out of his offense in order to secure the first ever D2 Conference Carolinas championship here. Now, it was not a path for the weak. Like I said, the amount of injuries that he had to navigate, as well as just tapping into the transfer portal, the recruiting that he did, especially because a lot of recruits I know from just keeping my ear down to the ground were a little worried because they committed to William Woods and then he was moving to Wingate. Would he still take them? How was he going to convince them of that? And he did so by just being a great recruiter and an even more awesome coach. You know that we always have a lot of love for him and just anybody who recruits Colorado. So, maybe if you come out here to the Box State and find some of our athletes, you too could be one of these Coach of the Year candidates. That's obviously not the 100% reason why. I think a lot of it is just his adaptability from this past year and what he was able to turn in for Wingate here, as they had an incredible season. They did not lose a lot of games. As I already mentioned, they were Conference Carolinas champions here. And on the season, I want to say that, well, it depends on what they classify as exhibition and what they don't, right? But, they lost to Ottawa, they lost to Kaiser early on in the season, but they battled that Ottawa team pretty well. They would lose to Barton in a little bit of an upset in early March, and they would lose to Milligan later in March. But after those two losses, they would rattle off nonstop wins and all double-digit victories outside of Emmanuel from there on out. So, just a great dominant season from the Bulldogs and a conference champ in Joe Schlager. The next Coach of the Year candidate here is from the Atlantic East as well as the ECAC champions, and that is Marymount here. They are represented by their very own Michael Rivera, and this Marymount did win not both. They won the Atlantic East last year. And we were curious on if they were going to be able to repeat. And if you asked me after the very first game, which is an easy time to overreact, I would say no, because they lost their very first game of the season against Immaculata, a team that, while being competitive, was not really in their weight class. And they barely pulled away from Holy Family, who is a team that wasn't really in their weight class the prior year. And then they split a series with Mercyhurst on the road early in the season. But once they found their footing, they kind of got back to being dominant with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 consecutive shutout wins. Okay, until Centenary finally scored on them, but they scored 62 in that game. Now, they would see one more hiccup, but their final loss of the season would be the last one that they need for lessons learned to proceed. They would lose to Eastern, a very tough competitor in that Atlantic East and ECAC conference here, but following that 1-point loss, they would take out some of that anger on Penn State, Schuylkill here, and then in the Atlantic East Championship, they would defeat the same Immaculata that they would lose their opener to in the season, and as the 2 seed would technically upset Eastern University in a 12-7 close win. And as if they weren't having just the time of their lives breaking Eastern's heart, they would beat them again by a single point in the ECAC conference tournament before defeating Franciscan University in the ECAC championship 37-26. So technically 2 different conference titles for Michael Rivera here in his pursuit and his success here. But really, I think that shrugging off those losses, beating those same teams at a later time, and doing so in pivotal fashion just shows great poise from his players and huge buy-in and adaptation from Michael Rivera. So he is, out of Marymount, the submission for Coach of the Year. Up next, we have a national champion in Rick E. Hufty here, Florida Gateway's very own. One of the best recruiters in the game, obviously landed such a large name in the likes of London Jenkins, and has 2 seasons of double-digit wins as well as national championships to his name in very, very dominant fashion. When Florida Gateway beats somebody, it's not gently. It is harsh, and it can be tough to watch sometimes. Gino and I got to see what they did last year in their national championship game, and Coach V followed their journey through their national championship just through relentless defense and a pretty fun offense that just gets the ball in the hands of their playmakers and lets them make plays. And one of the most successful, if not the most successful, 2-quarterback system in all of college flag football. That is in thanks huge part to the planning, the strategy, and just the overall execution that Hufty leads these women to, and obviously leads them to perform at very, very high levels. Multiple shutouts this year, multiple 50-point drubbings, honestly, and most notably a win over the, at the time, only national champion Ottawa Braves, I think is enough to be noticed on anyone's map, and it was in pretty solid fashion, and it firmly established them as one of my top 3 teams in the country for basically the remainder of the season. Be sure to listen to the end of season rankings that are going to be on this episode. But that is Ricky Hufty, my utmost respect for Florida Gateway's very own leader on the sideline. And then finally, we have NAIA national champion Tim Mims out of Warner. Obviously, through the other players, you have heard a lot of what this team was able to accomplish. Now they are one of the few undefeated teams in the entire country. They are one of the most dominant teams in the entire country as well. Just the way that they were beating teams. They end the season ranked number 1. They win the national championship. I don't know what other details you really need from me to hear about this season. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the votes. From Twitter, we have 3% of the fans voting for Joe Schlager out of Wingate. We have 5% of y'all voting for Ricky Hufty out of Florida Gateway. And we have 16% for Tim Mims. And so the fan PMC Coach of the Year is Michael Rivera out of Marymount with 76% of the votes. Shout out to our Northeasterners tuning in to Twitter/X. Once again, we might change up that format. Let us know in the comments if you are listening to YouTube, or I know that there's always feedback sections in the other aspects of podcasts as to how you want your voice to be heard for these end of year results, and be able to do polls for y'all, whether that's Google form or through some other kind of vehicle. But either way, PMC 2026 Coach of the Year for the fans is Michael Rivera of Marymount. However, the 2026 PMC Coach of the Year, to probably not that many people's surprise, is Tim Mims, earning a vote from Nate as well as Corey. Corey said, quote, "Collegiate coaching takes 2 forms, game management and roster management. You could be a great recruiter and not a great game manager, and vice versa. This year, Coach Mims earned his Coach of the Year award. His roster was elite, his coaching was on point, and he takes home a red banner to hang at Warner, the Royals' first in any sport." End quote. So not only does Corey talk about the impact that Mims has often on the field, but also within his very own community and at the University of Warner, and what this means to the entire school as a statement in that regard. Now, I am going to read from Scouting Flag's very own Jeremiah, who said, quote, Mims gets the nod. He designed a scheme that outscored opponents 506. Sorry, he didn't laugh. I'm laughing because it's just, it's one of those things where it's so crazy that you just have to laugh because it's so shocking. 506-0 to start the year and consistently kept his players in positions to succeed. Warner executed at a high technical level in all season, a direct reflection of Mims' preparation and coaching. Throw in the story of recruiting a two-way All-American at a sneaker convention, and this makes this coaching performance a tough one to top. End quote from Jeremiah. Now, I do here want to give a really quick shout out for myself, that's Cody here, to Coach Slager, as he helped Wingate overcome an insane amount of injuries en route to a conference title. But for me, it's really hard to argue against a perfect season, and that is what Tim Mims' Warner Royals provided. His recruiting is easily a massive factor in this, as he was able to swing for the fences and hit on every single big player he was pursuing, sometimes years in the making, and all those gambles paid off with a national championship. Gino here says, quote, oh, you already know. Tim Mims, step up to the podium, sir. This one's yours. Beyond the X's and O's, Mims pulled off some absolute sorcery by getting Maggie Lauber and OMG on this team. Stuff like that is what separates an elite coach from a good coach. You can drop all the pretty plays you want, but at the end of the day, it's the players who are executing those plays. Tim Mims built a roster of family-first, team-oriented players that believed in what he had to say. This accumulated into an unstoppable and honestly monstrous season that left every team they played in a state of disarray and sadness. Coach Mims went out and did everything that he predicted would happen, and then some. And for that, he deserves this Coach of the Year award, end quote. And I just want to interrupt before reading Coach V's excerpt here that when I was doing all of those interviews, be sure to check us out on Instagram and TikTok at Playmaker's Corner to see those interviews with so many Warner players that were integral to this season, so many members of PMC fam who we've had the pleasure of covering for multiple years, some of them, 1 year, some of them, and just getting to know them over our trip in Florida. But, all of them express just how much of a team, how much of a family it is. This is a team that has players from across literal ocean or bay. We have players from Panama on this Warner roster. We have players from Florida. We have players from Colorado. I mean, this roster is really just an amalgamation of high-level talent all coming together under the banner of one common goal. And, I think that shines through in the interviews and just how much this team loves each other. And I just wanted to agree with Gino on that is so important to have that culture instilled. And so with that in mind, I want to go ahead and cast Simon's final vote here for Coach of the Year that completes this sweep outside of the fan vote, where Coach V says, quote, I remember when Coach Mims took over this Warner program after their first year, and I went on record and said that it's important that you get the culture right and start players who will buy in. I also said that I trust him to make all the right decisions because his track record speaks for himself and that great players will play for great coaches. This is from Playmaker's Corner, episode 112, minute 40 to minute 41 and 33 seconds. So, side note from Cody here, go back, PMC episode 112, if you don't believe Simon here. But he has those psychic powers, and he continues here saying, quote, 4 years later, Coach Mims proved me right. Those 4 years included 4 straight winning seasons, multiple All-PMC players, multiple PMC award winners, including multiple MVP candidates, and the only non-quarterback MVP winner, and multiple deep postseason runs that showed Warner belonged. This year was going to be Warner's year, and they left no doubt on the table as they ran it and won their first ever national title. To watch this program transform from a program who had to forfeit so many games year one to stabilizing in year 2 and build into a juggernaut through the next couple years is a thing of beauty. Coach Mims deserves his flowers and more for building this program and achieving greatness with what he has built. I am honored to be able to cast my vote for Coach Mims. End quote. So with Nate, Corey, Jeremiah, Coach V, myself, and Gino all voting for Coach Mims, he is going to be your Playmakers Corner 2026 Coach of the Year for collegiate flag football. Shout out to the other nominees. We have nothing but love for all of you coaches, as well as all the coaches that we get to work with. You know, you guys ever need anything on the scene of Colorado, we have watch lists, we have camps coming up. We actually have a camp coming up here in just a few weeks that I want to put some people onto. It's going to be in July, and I believe it's going to be on July 10th. Stay tuned for more details on that from us, but please reach out whenever, and we would love to provide you with some of the Colorado talent that we have as y'all continue to grow the game across D3, JUCO, D2, NAIA, and especially in these next few years on the D1 level. Shout out to all y'all coaches. I can't wait to be hopefully amongst y'all's ranks one day, as well as Coach V and Coach Gino. But in the meantime, we'll just crown you as the best coach in the country and tell you to stay tuned for some of these other player awards that we have. And we are finally here. And as it is branded with Playmakers Corner in mind, we are at the most valuable playmaker, the MVP. Same thing, different spin on it. And boy, was this an awesome pool. Once again, just one of my favorite seasons ever of college flag football to cover. Super exciting, top to bottom, all across the country. JUCO, NAIA, and we also had D2, we also had D3. Well, there were a lot of people in consideration, and as we continue to rack up stats and stuff and get those submissions and just the access to this game continues to grow, we're going to do our best to cover it as best as we can. We have some awesome surprises for y'all in the future, but I do think that this is a great place for us to stick the landing here in the 2026 season, and we have some crazy candidates here for you, and one of them is going to be, two of them, you've already heard their name a million times. We got Valerie Ainge Bada here out of Barton, won the fan vote for Iron Woman of the Year. I think that is something to consider. You also look at, the fact that she was a Newcomer of the Year candidate and just found herself all over our all PMC content. I think that speaks range to what Barton needed from her and what she was able to provide. You also look at Nichelle Brown, who was in candidacy for Defensive Playmaker of the Year. She was my personal vote. Spoiler alert, go listen to that whole segment for that. She also was an absolute monster for our linebacker position Player of the Year that Gino got to go over, and, just where I also put my vote for there. So please listen to those segments and see what her impact was, as well as just understanding what she meant to the offense as a leading receiver. She was even in talks for Iron Woman of the Year because of her high-level impact, but she's definitely more of our defensive player kind of slotted in for this, who also did enough on offense to get consideration for most valuable playmaker. We also have Quarterback of the Year candidate Chihiro Owada, who cemented her legacy against Ottawa in the national tournament by throwing a game-winning touchdown throw on one of the most absurd and high-impactful plays. At the time when I saw it, I said it was easily a top 5 play in the history of the sport, maybe a top 3 play, just because it officially closed a chapter on, the opening chapter of the sport, in my opinion. And I think that narratively, that is just such a high level impact, especially from such a high profile international player in Chihiro Owada. Shout out to the Japanese sports page on Twitter/X that reposted our poll, and thank you to everyone who voted in that. I thought that was really cool to see, and that's one of the beauties of flag football, is that there is a lot of international representation. This game is super accessible. I'm super excited to, witness what goes down in the Olympics. There's been a lot of Team USA news as of today, which was May 26th. So keep your eyes on that, as well as other information that is going to come out. But, I think that it's so awesome to have a player as, high caliber as Chihiro, who did her thing on the college level with Kansas Wesleyan, has been so important to them over these past few years. I think so important as well for a new coach in Chris Snyder to get a player of Chihiro's caliber and for her to perform the way that she did down the stretch of the season for some massive wins, put up a heck of a fight against Kaiser, and then with their backs against the wall, absolutely just pinballed through Baker and Ottawa. Maybe didn't get to do that as much as they wanted to in the KCAC tournament, but boy, when you do it on the national stage, it stings a little bit differently for your opponent, and boy, does it leave a high impact, and this just isn't possible with that coaching change without Chihiro doing what she does, being an absolute drive put togetherer, and just the continued growth and clutch gene that she showed over these past few years. And then finally, Catherine Hutchinson out of Warner. This would be kind of a crazy MVP discussion if we didn't have the most statistically successful and record-wise most successful quarterback in the country without her being in discussion. Now, Nichelle Brown, as well as Catherine, finished 4th and 3rd in the Twitter votes. Once again, we are looking to reformat this, so please let us know if you have ideas in the comments of this video or episode, depending on where you're listening. And Valerie Ainge-Bada, despite being the fan vote for another award, comes in 2nd place here, as Chihiro Awada racks up 77% of the votes and is your PMC fan-voted most valuable playmaker for the 2026 season. So shout out to Chihiro, and shout out to your fans as well, helping you bring this hardware home. However, when we turn to the media poll outside of the fan poll, it is a unanimous selection for Catherine Hutchinson. Nathan Williams put in a vote for her. You also had Jeremiah as well put in a vote for her as well. And, as far as some of the other stuff, he kind of kept it Warner across the board, which makes sense as they were the most dominant team in the country. You also have Simon, who said, quote, "The greatest season from a quarterback in women's college football history, plus a national championship, has easily earned her this award. Stats aren't everything, but you cannot argue with both statistical greatness and winning." She joins Madison Carrera as an MVP candidate who put up both great numbers while going undefeated, end quote. You have Corey's very insightful and very wordy vote here where he says, quote, 7,850 yards, 163 touchdowns, 13.5 to 1 TD to INT ratio with 8.5 yards per attempt. Next question. End quote. Enough said, Corey said. And then you have myself. I said this type of season might never be replicated. I also want to push against the narrative. This is me here. I want to push against the narrative that some folks might have, that just because she had the best weapons in the country, that doesn't make her the MVP. Not every quarterback puts up these numbers with these weapons. I know that. And, we can play the hypothetical game all we want, but she did it. She knows the strengths of all of her receivers and put the Royals in position to win again and again and again and not lose once this season. Most valuable playmaker, easy to me. And then finally, Gino here, who got to witness the most of this greatness down at Nationals, said, quote, "This award comes down to on-the-field impact because that's what wins national championships." That's why Catherine Hutchinson deserves the 2026 PMC MVP. There's no one more valuable to their team than the quarterback who just set about every single season record for quarterbacks, plus won a national championship. She threw for 163 TDs in one season. There's quarterbacks who started 3+ years who didn't even throw close to that many touchdowns, end quote. And yeah, despite this being the biggest award of the award show, it is a pretty clear sweep. I know that a lot of y'all probably saw this coming. And honestly, just thinking back across these awards, it was hard to overlook the Warner Royals as they went undefeated, and just every piece of that team was just so damn talented. And I think it obviously all came together. And, for me, as well as the rest of this cast voting, it came down to who was kind of piloting that ship. And, all of them brought something so unique to this team and just produced so much. But obviously, there are so many great players that I was so happy to have recognized through the positions, through offensive playmaker, defensive playmaker, newcomer, breakout, as well as our new Iron Woman award, which I was super happy about. Also, this Most Valuable Playmaker segment is always such a fun segment to record. And then the leaders on the sideline and the Coach of the Year. And here's the beautiful thing about this is that every year there's going to be more and more new names and familiar names. There's going to be the pioneers of the sport. We're kind of getting through that first round of graduation for a lot of these players who helped build this foundation here. We have to watch Alyssa Linkus walk away from Ottawa. We had to watch Madison Carrera walk away last year. We had to watch Kennedy Foster walk away last year, and graduate and continue to grow the game. We had to watch Abby Brown walk away 2 years ago, and now she's taking over as the Ottawa head coach, which is just so exciting. And, we have Janae Scott from Thomas. She didn't play this year, but she's going to take over at McPherson. That's super exciting. You had Alexa Mansour, who assumed defensive coordinator responsibilities over at Kansas Wesleyan and helped them secure that success in their season that they saw towards the end. I believe that Chihiro Wada is on the way out, and you also have the likes of, I want to say Anna Pat Vincenzini is going to be on her way out, potentially Lauren Clark, I want to say, is going to be looking at the next chapter of, her career and what that looks like. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, on behalf of all the media, on behalf of all the fans, to the players, the coaches as well, but especially the players, the women of this game who have come in and made a difference culturally, athletically, and just, I don't know, just so many icons of the game. And there's so many different ways to say thank you to all of our past award winners. All of our past award candidates are all PMC teams from this year. Be sure to go check those out on all of our socials at Playmakers Corner for Instagram, at Playmakers Corner for TikTok, at Playmaker Corner on Twitter/X. We're also on Facebook. All of those posts are there. We love celebrating all of these great players. We're going to release another graphic, obviously with our Colorado bias a little bit, celebrating the great Colorado players who made impacts this year for their teams. And we are just going to continue to celebrate the excellence that is women's flag football, continue to track its growth as it skyrockets through college. We have the NCAA trying to do that first championship season in 2028, in addition to the Olympics and Fives doing its thing. We have so many great pioneers here and so many amazing women and female athletes who've just done so much for this game, and will continue to do so much for this game. And for them, we are eternally grateful. We appreciate the follows and the support that you have given. I can't wait to continue to interview and share the story of these amazing female athletes, and, just continue to share and promote this beautiful game of flag football and just the purity of which it is executed. But for the last time of this season, I have been your host, Cody Stauffer, signing off. Peace.